Teresa, it's so great to connect today. I've been following your work for over a decade now since I was a grad student. So I'm really happy for the chance we had to talk today.
I'm really pleased to be talking with you, Nate.
You had an incredible career. And as you think back on the lessons you've learned from your research, what lessons would you most want to pass on to others?
I've been thinking a lot lately about retiring because I just finished a 10-year research project on the experience of retiring. There was very little research on that previously. And I believe that my colleagues and I discovered something that is applicable to any life transition, even though we studied the retirement transition. And that's the lesson that I'd like to convey because I think it can be helpful to people, whatever their stage in life. I did want to say that this project was a departure from my previous topics, which were creativity and people's everyday inner work life and how it's affected by making progress in the work. But it was inspired. This project was inspired by something I discovered in my prior research, and that is that people will have their best days at work, the days when they feel most jazzed about their work and they're able to be their most creative and productive when they make progress in meaningful work. And after I finished that research, I started wondering, okay, so what is it like when your meaningful work comes to an end and you're no longer able to make progress on your meaningful work? So that question gripped me, and it does tie this research on retirement into the previous research. And I was also personally at the time of my life where I was beginning to think about when might I retire? When and how might I personally retire? And what's that experience like? And I found very little on this in the retirement literature. There was a lot on the importance of health and wealth, but very little on what the psychological experience is like. Psychological experience, what happens in relationships? How do people restructure their lives after retiring? How does it go bad? And how does it go well? So that's what I wanted to look at in this research. And I was joined by fabulous colleagues, Lottie Balin from MIT, Marcy Crary from Bentley University, and Kathy Cram and Tim Hall from Boston University. And we interviewed 120 people. 14 of them we followed repeatedly with interviews throughout their retirement transition. And from this, we learned if you want to have a smooth transition into a satisfying retirement life, it's really important to work toward alignment between yourself and your life structure. And I can explain those concepts if you'd like, Nate. What direction would you like me to go? And I can talk about what helps people achieve alignment if you think that would be of interest to your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting you're talking about transitions. Retirement is an important one, but I think your research is probably going to apply to lots of people in lots of ways because we go through these different transitions at multiple points in our life. And I think so often people think like retirement is just going to be amazing. You know, my students, I'll ask them, what do you want to do? And like a large number of them always say, you know, I want to get rich and retire. And so I think your research is great because you're going to provide insight into how we can do this right and how we mess this up. So yes, I'd love to learn about the alignment between ourself and our life structure.
Okay, and I do think that this is relevant to other transitions, like the transition from college to working world, the transition from being single to being married
Yeah.
or having a life partner, the transition to parenthood. Oh my gosh, huge transition. The transition from one career to another career,
Yeah.
getting a big promotion at work, many transitions that we go through as adults.
And can I
So
just say one real quick
yeah,
that my
yeah.
wife and I are thinking about? Our youngest daughter is now going to school. My wife has been a stay-at-home mom for 15 years. And so starting in January, the youngest is finally leaving for school every day. And so this is a big transition for us.
Yeah. Okay. So may I take your wife as an example,
Yeah, that's
please?
great.
All right. So someone who's transitioning from a period of time where they were not in the outside world of work, she was certainly working, but she wasn't in the outside world of work. Um, Herself is everything important about her. So we all have multiple identities. My guess is that your wife has identities of being a wife, a mother, a professional, and whatever profession she was trained in or whatever she got her degree in. She probably shares an identity of being an American, maybe. Members of various communities. She also has important values and priorities and needs at this point in her life. So the self is the combination of all those things. Her life structure is the combination of everything important in her life. So certainly her relationships, but also her activities, what she spends her time doing, and the groups that she belongs to, the organizations she belongs to, or the organization she might join when she goes back into the world of work, and the places where she spends her time. So her life structure is going to radically change
Mhm.
if she decides to go into the world of work, and it sounds like she's oriented in that direction. It would behoove her to think now, youngest is going off into school. So what about that new life structure? No kids at home during the day, during the school hours. How does that life structure fit the person that she is now and the other structures in her life? And how might it not fit? And she can do that if she develops awareness. So I'm going to give you 4 A's, Nate. The first A is alignment of self and life structure. They influence each other. Her self can have an impact on her life structure. She can make a change. She can decide to find a job. She could also decide that she's going to work in a volunteer position for a certain number of hours a week. But she has to think about the extent to which that fits with other structures in her life, such as the family's financial needs, for example, and her own need for fulfillment and for accomplishment. So self and life structure constantly influence each other. And this came out so clearly in our research. She needs to develop an awareness of self and life structure by looking in a clear-eyed way, maybe having a friend, a close relative, possibly you, Nate, possibly even a counselor, a life coach, help her get that clear-eyed view of her current needs, priorities, most important values, most important identities, and get that clear-eyed view of life structure. And in our book, which we call Retiring, Creating a Life That Works for You, we have exercises whereby people can develop that second A of awareness to help them achieve that alignment. The third A is agency. Once you have that clear-eyed view of yourself and your life structure, what's working for you in your life structure and what might not be working so well, you can exercise agency by proactively making a move on that life structure. Find a job. The move you might decide to make on your life structure is to get married. If you're a single student and you have a relationship that is very important to you and you're going to be graduating, you might make that move on your life structure. Or you might decide to eliminate something from your life structure. And we saw that in the lives of many of the people that we studied. They decided that retiring was the right thing to do. And that was to remove career, remove organization, company from their life structure, and to fill it with other things. And the fourth A is adaptability, because guess what? We cannot control everything in our life structure. Life happens. One day, perhaps you and your wife will be blessed with a grandchild. That's probably something that you're not going to be controlling. It will be up to your child and their partner as to whether they want to have a child. that will happen to your life. And, really happy thing, probably, you're going to have to adapt to it. And your wife might find that when she goes off to a job now, other things that might affect other things in her life structure that she will have to adapt to. It will bring new relationships into her life structure. Some of them may be positive, some of them might not be so positive. And it will be a matter of exercising agency where she can, but exercising adaptability where there are things that are out of her control. Does that make sense? And is there anything you'd like me to elaborate on there?
Yeah, I think this is great because it can be easy for us to go into these transitions without a plan, without being thoughtful about it and just thinking like, well, I'll deal with it when I get there. And you provide a great framework for her and for us to think about before we hit that transition. And then, of course, it's relevant while we're in it to help us deal with it most effectively. One of the questions that came to mind was, what is the biggest mistake people commonly make when it comes to these transitions or comes to retirement?
Well, we saw many things that people regretted afterwards. We are reluctant to ourselves as the researchers brand something as a mistake,
Right.
but when people themselves say, "Oh, I wish I had done this differently," I'm going to point to a quote that we got from one of the people that we followed. I interviewed this person 11 times, starting the year before he retired, while he was finishing up his work, and then 6 years into his retirement. He said, because he had a very turbulent, definitely not smooth transition into retirement, he said, my wife and I planned everything well, meaning to him, financial planning, except what to do with our time not working anymore. And that was something that we saw happen with a number of people, not everyone certainly, but a number of people thought, okay, I've got all my financial planning in place. I know what's going to happen. This is our budget, all that. And then they're euphoric the first week or two of retirement. Hey, no alarm clock. And then start to feel like they're drifting a bit, like they're a little untethered because they've lost that life structure element of work, which was the main thing they spent their waking hours doing for decades, and didn't realize that they need at least one or two things to give them some structure to their life. And many people do have a need for ongoing accomplishment. That leads me to one more lesson, if you let me sneak it
Yeah,
in.
yeah, definitely.
So this is a lesson from all of the research I've done. I researched creativity for about 40 years, researching the progress principle and researching retirement. And that is the importance of small wins. Making progress to the extent that you possibly can in whatever's important to you, at least incremental progress as frequently as you can. I saw that in my studies of creativity, where if people persisted with something, especially looking at people who are trying to be creative for a living, in R&D labs, for example, or in design firms, people who had to be creative in their work, if they could make at least incremental progress day by day, or at least frequently, even if they suffered setbacks in the work, and that's the nature of the game when you're doing complex creative work. If they could be helped by their organization and their colleagues, if they could help each other to make at least incremental progress every day, that made a huge difference for their sense of well-being at work and for their ability to continue being creative and productive, even in the face of setbacks. And I think we see that in retiring as well. When people are going through a massive life transition, even though things feel fuzzy and uncertain for a while, and they always do, that's called liminality. When you're going through a big transition, things are going to feel uncertain. As long as you feel that you're getting a little bit of direction, making a little bit of progress in a positive way toward establishing a new life structure for yourself, that's going to be really rewarding.
So this is interesting to me and relevant for what I've experienced the last 3 months. As I was sharing before the call, I was teaching at a study abroad this last fall. So we go to Italy and I would teach during the week, and on the weekends we would travel. And after about 2 or 3 weeks of these pretty big traveling trips on the weekend, seeing some cool places, it started to feel like I am so grateful that we get to come back to our town, Paderno, each week and teach. And if I was just touring, if I was just sightseeing Europe for 3 weeks, I would already be sick of it. And we had, 3 full months there. And even by the end, it was, I think I had enough. But what I realized, and I think it's relevant to what you're talking about, is coming back to Paderno, the town we were in, each week and teaching the students was a way for me to make progress. And it was a way to make it's like, teaching, and it was the structure that we needed. And everybody, I was just surprised at how happy our family was to always come back. Because I was just thinking like, oh, we're always going to be looking forward to the long weekends. A little bit of a different maybe application than what you were describing, but it just seems to me how relevant the importance of small wins, progress, and structure are. Because in theory, it's like, oh, it's going to be so great. We're going to sleep in every day and we'll have all the freedom and free time in the world to do whatever we want. But after a while, you get bored of sightseeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask, Nate, were your kids in school in Italy?
Um, Two of the kids were doing virtual school, and then my wife was homeschooling the two youngest kids.
Okay, so that gave the kids structure too
Exactly.
during the
Very
week,
good.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, and your wife as well. And I agree with you completely. I think that that does come through in the research that I've done. The need for some structure and some way of feeling that you are progressing in your life, that you're doing something that matters to you and something that's moving you forward in some way.
Well, Teresa, this is so great. These are hard-earned lessons. You've been studying this for decades. You're now experiencing this. So I just really appreciate the chance to talk to you. Any final suggestions or words of advice as we wrap up here?
Patience. Be patient with yourself when you're going through a big life transition, and be patient with the people around you. Be kind to yourself.
That's great. I love it, Teresa. I love this interview. You've provided some great insight. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for inviting me, Nate. I enjoyed it.